Okay. Next, Don Pugh fished in Alaska beginning in 1969 at 15 years old. He became a captain 2 years later and gill netted for salmon in Cook Inlet, halibut in the Gulf of Alaska, and rockfish in Sitka. Pat Dixon has always said that Don and his brother Dean taught him how to fish. If that was actually true, they probably would have starved. Please welcome Don Pugh.
First of all, how about a hand for Rob and Doug? They don't get to go anywhere. They have to sit and listen to all of us. I'm not a poet. Now, we're Fisher poets, right? But I'm not a poet. I just happen to have done enough dumb stuff to be a storyteller. But before we came down here, John Broderick, who's the grandfather of this whole thing, he wrote us all and he said, even if you're not a poet, give one a try. Now, I've never written a poem in my entire life, but I took John's words to heart and I worked for weeks writing my first poem. Now you guys get to hear it. Roses are red. Sockeyes are red. Now at this point I got a little stumped. So I wrote, poems are hard. And I ended it with fish. It's real hard following these poets with something like that, I tell you. So, all right, back to the dumb stuff. How many of you heard the saying, bad decisions make for good stories? Well, I've made a few of those, and so I wrote a story about it. You know how it goes. I'm going to give this a shot. What could go wrong? Well, I fished in Cook Inlet, like Rob said, for 20 years. Cook Inlet has the highest tidal change of water in the United States, 30 feet. And out in the middle of it, when the water is moving that much of water is moving, it's moving about 5 knots. So you have to take into account what the tide is doing when you go out on the fish grounds. So I'd headed out one morning, it was dark. Entire fleet's heading straight out. What do? They don't know what they're doing. I go straight out and I go south, and I'm thinking, well, they all find the fish fine, but it's going to be all of them fighting over whatever fish is there. I'm going to go south and get all my fish all to myself. Now I'm going against the tide. Mind you, the tide's flooding, and those guys, I'm thinking, they get into the fish, they only got 10 miles before they hit that northern boundary, and the fishing game's going to pinch them all. I'm going to be the only one going to be legal today. So I set out, I run against the tide, and I hear all the guys talking on the radio. Looks like there's some jumpers out here, it's going to be pretty good. That's just fish talk. They don't know what they're talking about. I run down, I'm all by myself, and it gets to be about 6:50, 6:55. Our nets have got to be in the water at 7 a.m. And the radio goes quiet. Everybody's set. Now there's a lot of expectation when you first set your net. You have this vision in your head that the fish are going to light it up. I set mine. Nothing. Not a cork bobble. And then the radio. All the guys get on the radio. Woo! There it is, lighting it up. Up and down the net. I see another one. Man, they're just hitting it like crazy. And another guy comes on and says, where are you at? Oh, we just went straight out the river. Now I've got to sit there and try and pick my net up, but I've got the flood, right? I thought I can get up and catch them. Well, the tide changed, and now I got to run against it. I have a 10-knot boat. I'm going against the 5-knot tide. They're 15 miles ahead of me. I missed them all. The average boat that day caught 6,000 pounds. The Highliners got 10,000. I got 2. Now, why did I do that? Because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, one thing I forgot to say is this is going to be a little bit of a group participation thing, so just remember what I just said there, because I'm going to ask you to say it with me when I get through all these dumb things that I did. Cook Inlet, the middle of it, it's called the middle rip. When that thing is snorting, it can be a 1/4 mile wide. The waves can stand up like towers. And those tides get up on the beach and they can take every single bit of logs, sticks, stumps, and literally trees and whoosh it back out into the inlet, and they all end up in the middle rip. Well, that's where the fish are too, so you have to get into the middle rip to fish it. I was in there one day and I was only throwing 1/3 of the net out, trying to be safe. There was a little bit of wood around, but it didn't look too bad. There were a few fish around. So I'm going, well, there's a few fish and I've got 1/3 of the net. How many could I get if I throw the whole net out? I looked around. I don't see all that much wood. So I set the buoy in the rip, set it out away from the rip, thinking, anything goes wrong here, I'll just disconnect from the net, run back into the rip, pick the buoy up, and pick away from it. Pretty smart. I don't know where all the wood came from. By the time I got to that buoy, that net was full of every stick and log and stump and tree in the inlet, and I now have nothing to do for the rest of the day except pick them all out. Now, one thing about when you're picking all that wood out of a net, you can't throw it back in the water because it'll go right back in the net. You got to pile it on deck. I spent all day, and at the end of the day, I had a beaver dam of wood and no fish. Why? Because? Yes, it did. Went into the beach one day. A buddy of mine said, don't go in there. He said, there's rocks. I said, well, yeah, I know there's rocks in there, but they're all nice and smooth. The tides smooth them over. I hook one with a net, it'll just roll right over it. No big deal. So I go right in on the beach, drop the buoy, set it out, then fish are hitting it, and I'm going, I'm a smart guy today. Till I hooked a rock, and it must not have been a smooth one, because the net just went whoop. And now my buoy and my boat are 6 feet away, and the rock has got the middle of my net. So I just said, that's no big deal. Just pick back to the rock, power the boat around the rock, and I'm going to be free. Well, that would have worked, except that the rock split the net in half. And now my half a net's floating free down the beach at 5 knots. I got to go chase after it. Well, I hook up to it finally, and I get it, and now I'm thinking I'm going to get out of this just without a problem at all until that half of the net hooked another rock. Now I'm a set netter. Well, I ended up getting that net back finally. Again, spent all day, got some fish out of it, but I now had 2 halves of a net. And I got back to the river, and my friend said to me, why'd you go in there? I told you about the rocks. And I said, because? Yes, it did. Buddy of mine had the hots for a girl that worked on another boat. The problem was we were fishing every single day, and he didn't get his chance for romance. And we were beating our brains out, getting 15, 20 fish a day, fishing all day. We weren't even paying for our expenses. Day after day after day, and he's not getting his shot. He finally decides, well, I'm going to throw a barbecue up on the bluff where he had a trailer. So he invites all of us up there, and he's a good cook, and he made a big barbecue dinner. We have to go fishing the next day, and another friend of mine, I was sitting there together, and we're going, you know, we should leave about an hour early tomorrow because we might get some fresh ocean reds coming in. If we get down far enough south, we're going to be the first ones in line. So we tell Lance, I'm going to call him, Lance Romance. We tell him what our plan is. He looks at us. He looks over at the girl, looks back at us, looks back at the girl. And he looks at us and he goes, nah, I don't think so, not for 15, 20 fish. I'm going to stay here and see what happens. I said, all right, just telling you our plan. Well, next morning, we do. A friend of mine and I, we left an hour early. We run 30 miles down the inlet, set out east to west, the sun just coming up, and it kind of blinds you, and the sun's right on the horizon like that. But the part of the net I could see, there were some pretty good hits. Sun comes a little further up, and I start to see the whole net, and now I'm getting some really good fish here. I had 500 reds. That particular year, we were getting $3 a pound. That was a $10,000 set. So I had set it out again. Got another 500. In the afternoon, set a third time, got a 500 again. And at the end of the day, I had just enough time to set one more time and got another 100. I got 1,600 reds, $30,000 a day. That was a happy run back to the river. This is not one of the dumb things, by the way. So we get back to the river, get all unloaded, cleaned up, and I'm tied up to the dock, and here comes Lance. Chest all puffed out, walking down the dock, coming down to tell me all about it. Now, I'm a really nice, polite guy. I listened to him. When he got done, he goes, so, how'd you do today? Did you get 50? No, I didn't get 50. Oh, thank God. He said, if you'd have got 50, he said, I'd have just shit. I go, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but I did a little bit better than that. What do you mean? I said, well, I got more than 50. Well, what, you get 100? No. Oh, thank God. I said, I'm not going to keep you in suspense, man. I said, I got 1,600. I don't know where all the color went in his face, but it drained out, and he got up real slow, took the 2 steps up out of my cabin, up onto the deck of my boat, and he turned around and he looked at me and he goes, you know, it seemed like a good idea. We had a year once where we made a lot of money. And on a fish camp, you really can't go anywhere. And so personal checks are good, especially to the local amateur pharmacist. Let that sink in for a little bit. So it wasn't just me, but you know, we're going, well, we're working hard, we kind of deserve this. And then come tax time in April, because I had written on that check fishing supplies and deducted it off my taxes, the agent didn't think that was a real good idea. And he said, why'd you do that? I said, because it wasn't. Well, I fished for 20 years. For a number of circumstances, I sold my salmon boat, sold my halibut boat, both within about 3 or 4 weeks of each other, and I was retired as a fisherman after all that time. And now I sit there and I wonder, sometimes, do I regret it? The only thing I can say is it seemed like a good idea at the time. Thank you very much.